I put out on Twitter that night when I, got back to the hotel and I realized how heavy that is to be a former agent to transport somebody that is undocumented in your car. Although I transported them to the border patrol because the border patrol wouldn't get them. And I just put out, yeah, I broke your law, and I tagged
Chief of that
the chief,
sector.
yeah, the chief of that sector, Maudlin, and I said, I'll be in your area a couple more days. You can come get me if you want. Welcome back, everybody, to Border Patrol Watch. I'm Jim Budd, former senior patrol agent turned immigrant rights activist. And Marianna, my good friend, is with me today. How you been doing, Marianna?
I'm doing all right. Things are extra suspiciously quiet in the Rio Grande Valley these
They
days.
all across the border. I have a feeling when the numbers come out for February, they're going to be somewhat low again, like January is.
It's a
And,
it's amazing how these numbers can fluctuate so dramatically, almost as if someone is controlling the tides, you know?
well, I mean, we last left off, I was headed to Sasabe, Arizona. And for those of you who don't know, Sasabe is a very small town in Mexico that just went through a cartel war. And out there, the smugglers are bringing the migrants, the asylum seekers who cannot present themselves at the ports of entry because they're metering, and they're bringing these asylum seekers to basically the Sasabe area. There's part of the wall where it ends. There's large gaps in the wall, so they can just send them on through. And it's not that in some parts the cartel did make the gaps, it's true. In other parts, it's actually the US government that made the gaps because the wall started to fall down. And yes, that was the Trump wall. The Trump wall has been falling down since it was built, quite honestly. Well, here's what I notice is it's raining, it's snowing a lot out in that area. Fortunately, when I was out there, it was not. It was cold, but it wasn't too bad. It was, I think it got up to like 70 or something the day I was there. So yeah, I got invited over there to speak to a group of clergy. And so every time I try and go over there, I try and get as much in as I can. I was able to volunteer with the Green Valley Samaritans. That's the senior citizen Samaritans, humanitarians out there in Sasabe. It was interesting. I got to volunteer with my favorite volunteer in the whole world, Barb Lemon. So we went out there and we took 4x4s. Took a while to get out there. Mind you, I did not see a Border Patrol agent the entire way out there, and you have to take dirt roads to get all the way out there, so it's not like we were just on the highway and then boom, we're on the border. You gotta like do an hour's worth of four-wheeling, and there's hunters and all sorts of people passing by and stuff. And then we
And
got down to the border road, so there's just two cars of us, so there's about, I think there was about seven or eight of us.
and for sure, you're being watched and monitored by the surveillance that's out there, the
Oh yeah.
towers,
Oh
the
yeah.
aerostat blimps, all of those things. So
Yeah.
they're
And I
watching.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have access to my phone. I assume they know where I am. They know if I'm visiting you, or they know. I assume that because I've been more many times that CBP is monitoring me and stuff. So by people within CBP. So, and we got out there and we went past. So right on the border road, you have the Trump wall, and then this one area where Border Patrol has kind of created this open air detention site. This one didn't have any cages, and it didn't have, at least when we went past it at first, we wanted to go all the way down to the end of the border road, which is where most of the migrants end up crossing. And then the problem is a lot of them are like the people that we met, unable to continue walking the all-terrain road that Border Patrol built because, get this, Mariana, we actually had one of our guys had like this GPS tracker on him, and it can measure the grades of the road as you go up them. They built some of these hills on the border road at 20% grade. I mean, that's I had to put I was in a was I in a Toyota 4Runner or something like that, and I had to put it into four-wheel and then sometimes all the way down into first gear.
For
And
people
and
who
so
don't understand, that's a really steep incline,
yeah, like when you're
that's
driving on the freeway and you're coming up to a big hill, they'll tell you whether you're going down it or up it. They'll be, this is a 6% grade, and that's 6% is considered to be pretty steep. But these are 20% grades. And so, I mean, it was no problem getting up it, but I had to literally crawl up it in this 4x4. And so we see the people in the camp, and we waved at them and told them, we'll be right back. We're going to go down and pick up other people. And they're like, okay. There was maybe, 30, 40 people in there, something like that. And everything was calm and fine. I did see a camera crew in there, local camera crew from KGUN, K Gun. And so we went to the end of the road, and that's where we found a group, I would say probably about 7. And we didn't have enough space in both our cars, so we left some of our senior Samaritans there. And I put a husband and wife from Zacatecas and their 2-year-old child in the back of the 4Runner. And I did ask him before I put them in the car. I said, do you wish to claim asylum in Spanish, or do you need asylum? I think was the way I put it, because I don't know the word for claim in Spanish. And they said, oh, yes, yes, And I said, okay, so you want to see the migra, you need to file your papers. And okay, yeah. And you can't make it the rest of the way. Oh, no, no, no. And then one girl was pregnant. And so we took them. I put them in my car and I transported them down the border road a couple miles to the camp. Now,
how did you feel about that? About no, for real, about
yeah.
putting them in your car because I have had just a handful of encounters here in the Mission area. I've never put anybody in my car. I carry water with me. I will stop.
Hmm.
I will ask if they need assistance, especially emergency medical assistance, or for me to call Border
Right.
Patrol because sometimes Border Patrol knows they're there and they don't come or they
Hmm.
don't interact with them because it's like, let them suffer in the heat and exposed, or right now in the mosquitoes, which are like a plague. How
It
did you
was,
feel about that?
I mean, they asked, because they know that I know enough Spanish to assure them that I'm taking them to the camp and this and that. And they want to make sure that at least somebody in the car speaks Spanish. So that's why I got volunteered to drive that, or asked to drive them. And I thought about it for a minute, but I mean, they've been allowing these same Samaritans to transport migrants to the camp because they're not willing to do it. Border Patrol's not willing to do it. And although I know that the US attorney in Arizona said that they would never give a promise that they wouldn't charge the Samaritans with what they call alien smuggling, that so far they have not been doing that. And they've actually been relying on the Samaritans to deliver the migrants to the Border Patrol. So the Border Patrol in Sasa Bay is not going out and seeking migrants. They're not going out and tracking anybody. They're sitting in Sasa Bay FOB, which is Ford. Was that Ford Operating
Operating
Base? I think.
base. Mhm.
Yeah, and then they take them there. And so it was, I think at the time, I didn't realize how monumental it was. But when I got back to my hotel that night and I had time to calm down and think about it, I mean, that is a big deal, because in the Border Patrol, we would consider that to be smuggling, even though it's not smuggling. You're trying to save somebody's life, and the Border Patrol's unwilling to go out there and do it. And they're leaving pregnant women and children out there to freeze to death or to starve, and they don't care.
So, as a former agent, I've talked to lots of agents here, but for people who don't know, why would agents just sit at the local base or station and not expend the time, energy, and resources necessary to do their damn jobs. Why?
Probably most likely because they're being ordered to not do their jobs, just as I was ordered back in the day to stop finding so many freaking bodies and making the Border Patrol look bad. So they just sit them in there and then they just take all the resources away. So when they did finally come to pick up the migrants for that day, there was probably about 40, maybe no more than 50 migrants, but it took 6 heavily armed agents, one with an assault rifle, as well as 2 contracted workers who were heavily armed as well. These guys all, first of all, look like they're on steroids. They all look like they're with Bortac or something. And just seeing the fear and, I've mentioned this a couple times, like the after 9/11, the Border Patrol agents are called New Patrol. Before 9/11, they're called Old Patrol. And I've just never seen the fear that these guys have with these
Is it
migrants. It's
really
insane.
is it really fear, or is it just that so many now are former military and former veterans, even who, that is their mindset for
Well, yeah, because they're
dealing with the
trained to
world
treat them.
in
Yeah,
general.
they're trained to treat them as enemy combatants.
That and that
That's the
they are
difference.
operating in a
Mhm.
domestic conflict
War
zone
zone.
or
Mhm.
war zone. They actually, the Union and Border Patrol use that word. So they are forward deployed in a war zone where
Yeah.
they are encountering, again, words of the Border Patrol, fighting age men. Although
Well,
you
not
just
only
talked
that, but
about
Art Del
what
Cueto calls them terrorists. Art Del Cueto says if you don't stand in line and go through a port of entry, which he knows is impossible, and you come across the border, without being inspected, then you're a terrorist, is what he says.
you encountered family units, pregnant women, children.
Uh-huh. Everybody who needs asylum. We were driving along the wall to go find the family. There's these gaps in the wall and I noticed a cartel guy sitting on a rock and he was kind of like looking at me. And so I had them stop the car and I said, "Do you need any water?" In Spanish. He said, "Yeah." And he came down. I said, "Would you like an apple or an orange or granola bar?" "Yeah." So I gave him that and then I was like, "Where are all the migrants?" because because there's not that many people crossing right now. So it's like, what happened? Something changed from December to January where the migrant flow was cut in half. So what is that? And I had suspected that Biden was somehow getting Mexican officials to intercept the migrants and send them elsewhere. And that is exactly what the cartel member told me is going on. And then also the migrants that we encountered in the camp said the exact same thing, that what happens is the Biden administration has, obviously they're paying for the Mexican immigration officials and the federales to intercept the migrants as they get close to the border, and then they're physically forcing them on buses and sending them south all the way back down to Chiapas, which is down by Guatemala, and so that means they have to then turn around and start again. And I'm like, "So do you have to pay bribes again all over?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah, we're not
Even
giving
the same
anybody a
people.
free
Yeah.
ride.
They
Yeah.
said the whole way up, it's like everybody has their hand out is what they said.
Well, and
So
then what you heard there, you and I had not even discussed this because you were on that trip,
mhm.
and, in the desert with no cell phone coverage and all this.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I spoke to a person in the Rio Grande Valley who does work on both sides of the border with migrants, and the Matamoros camp right across the river from Brownsville, Texas, has consistently now for, since Title 42 had 3 to 4,000 people in it in a
Mhm.
makeshift camp. These are people living on cardboard floors with tarps overhead or in the open air. As of this weekend, the camp's cleared out. There are fewer than 2 dozen people there. 24 people reported there, I believe, on Friday of this previous week on March 1st. And I asked the same question, where are all the people? And I was told that the Mexican officials, the police are coming in, rounding everybody up, forcing them onto buses and sending them to other places. And
Mhm.
specifically, I was told Arizona and California, and sending many of them back to Chiapas. So we have you have a cartel member, I have a humanitarian worker who is
And the
local,
migrants
and
are
the
saying this
migrants
too.
themselves, all independently
Mhm.
confirming that the Biden administration and the US Department of Homeland Security are coordinating this.
Mhm.
So they've sent them all back. They may or may not be holding some of them there. They're maybe being dropped off in conflict zones like Sasa Bay, where you said they did recently have a cartel war. We know
Mhm.
places like Juarez are very dangerous. Even Tijuana can be very dangerous. Will they have the capacity to load them on buses and send them all back for some staged caravan invasion ahead of November election day? Will they do
I bet you that's the forces that are going on within like Mexico right now is you've got Biden and Mexican officials trying to push everybody away from the border, and you probably have GOP operatives trying to push them to the border. And so it's just
and
it's insane. It's
the rest
insane
of the
what's going
country,
on.
they see what's on the news and they believe it, even if it's from
Yeah.
some tiny little postage stamp park like Shelby Park in Eagle Pass, and they believe the whole border is being invaded with migrants just spilling across. And we know that's not the case. We
Mm.
also know people who live and work on the borderlands that you can set your clock by a caravan, a quote unquote crisis, an invasion, a violent incident, and election days. You know,
About
as
every couple of years, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can set
I
your
mean,
clocks by it.
I think what's interesting about you were talking about the camp in Montemoros. Is that the camp that I went and visited when I
It
came?
is. It is the camp that you
So
went and saw firsthand.
the difference between that camp though and the camp I visited is that that camp is in Mexico versus the border patrol camp I was at. And the other thing is that the migrants in that camp are waiting and getting CBP-1 apps and trying to cross legally. So not only are they intercepting the migrants who cannot legally cross at a port of entry, but they're also intercepting the migrants who are waiting in line to cross legally with their appointments. So that would also tell you that then the Biden administration is feeling pressure with all of the people coming through the ports of entry legally and being released into the streets.
They
And so that's why they're
they
doing it.
absolutely are, and you're hearing calls now from these anti-immigrant groups, the ones who said, "We're not anti-immigrant, we just want them to stand in line and do it the legal way." Well, the
Mhm.
January numbers are out for 2024. It's the beginning of March. It'll be a while before the February numbers are out. But US Border Patrol for just the southern border in January of 2024, and these are encounters, mind you, not apprehensions. And we always try to address the difference there. Encounters, 124,200 people, a decrease of 50% over December of 2023. So those numbers fell by half. And
Mhm.
CBP, the parent agency of Border Patrol, their January number is 176,205. And that number, you have to read the fine print, but that number is also encounters and includes the US Border Patrol numbers. So that includes the 124,200
That's
that
so
Border
low.
is reporting. So of the CBP encounters, 50,000 of them muscle minnows. Actually, the official number is 45,000 were legal presentations for scheduled appointments at ports of entry on the CBP One app. So we are talking about, well, let me go back. The CBP number is a decrease of 42%
Mm-hmm.
over December of 2023, but 45,000 of those. So, what, 30% muscle minnows, doing
Mm-hmm.
the math in my head, came the legal way,
Yeah.
came the legal way. And, 45,000 is a big number, but it supports your, what you're supposing, which is that now the Biden administration is getting a lot of pressure to shut that down, to
Well, that
decrease
was the
those
thing
numbers as well.
yeah, that was the thing that happened after Title 42 ended. And then you would see in the Tanton Network and the anti-immigrant groups, they would say, oh, now Biden has figured out how to push illegal immigrants through the legal holes and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you guys are never satisfied. The only time you don't bitch is when the migrants are white. That is the
Yeah.
only time you don't bitch. Ukrainians, you didn't have a fucking peep to say about any of that shit, but everybody else you have a problem with. So, yeah. I mean, I put out on Twitter that night when I, got back to the hotel and I realized, how heavy that is to be a former agent to transport somebody that is undocumented in your car. I Although I transported them to the border patrol because the border patrol wouldn't get them. And I just put out, yeah, I broke your law, and I tagged
Chief of that
the
sector.
chief, yeah, the chief of that sector, Maudlin. And I said, I'll be in your area a couple more days. You can come get me if you want. But at any rate, I mean, I'm not going to leave anybody out there. If I happen to be tooling on the border road and somebody comes out and they're desperate for water, I'll give them water. And I'm not going to ask them. I'm not a border patrol agent. I haven't been a border patrol agent for over 20 years now. So I don't have the right to question their citizenship. That's why I ask them, do you want to claim asylum? I don't ask them what their citizenship is. And so I just, it was a big step for me. It was, but I think what affected me more about that trip was so we went down and we picked up these people, and then we came back, and then the woman who was riding with me, uh the Green Valley Samaritan, took my truck and took it back, and I stayed in the camp. And this local reporter from Kaga came over and was talking to me, and he didn't ask me for an interview, so I was glad about that because I don't like to do interviews when I'm volunteering and stuff. And I don't like to be filmed when I'm doing that. Although if they just film me in general, I can't stop them. If they're just filming what we're all doing in camp, I can't stop them. But there was a young man, and I think he was from Honduras, and he was just sitting on one of the logs out there in the middle of the desert and in the camp. And somebody said his feet are injured. He needs help. But at the same time, this K-Gun reporter is telling me, you just missed Art Del Cueto, the vice president of the union. He was just here like 10, 15 minutes ago before you showed up with these migrants. I would have loved to see you too. And I said, oh, no, you don't. You don't want to see us go at it because it won't be pretty. And I said, so he was out here did he have his own camera crew? And oh, yeah, he had the big guys. He had Fox News out here. And I said, oh, to film this massive invasion of all these just 40 migrants that they're so overwhelmed, right? And he just kind of laughed. And I said, so did he tend to this man? And he's like, no, he just filmed and left. And that just, oh, this man had one thin layer of skin left on his feet. And they were bleeding in a lot of areas, but mostly you could tell he had probably at some point gotten his socks wet and has been walking on his feet in these wet shoes for God knows how long. And I think he was kind of sobbing a little bit, and I think it's because just we're running around trying to pay attention and trying to see what's going on in the camp because we just got there, and we realized, okay, this one man, he needs some serious help. So another volunteer was out there with a college group, and I think he was the professor of the group, and he speaks Spanish much better than I do, and I certainly don't speak medical Spanish. I was never an EMT in the Border Patrol. I just know basic first aid. And so there I am, a former senior patrol agent, former acting supervisory Border Patrol agent on my knees, tending to this man's feet. It's not that I wouldn't have tended to his feet if I was an agent. It's just, I think most I think most of us would have ignored him, quite frankly, and I think I'd be lying to myself if I thought maybe I wouldn't have ignored him. What I saw Art Del Cueto do, or what I understand Art Del Cueto did, is exactly what most of us are trained to do, is to ignore them and to just get them back across the border and not deal with them and shut them up. And I sat there in the sand and I cleaned his feet, and then um, we put antiseptic on it, which
Ouch.
hurt. Yeah, which hurt him. And and then we put these little sticky pads on his feet, like you would put for a corn or something on your toe to help cushion it. And so put that on all the pressure points of his feet. And then I got called away to do something else, and I I asked them to get him some clean socks and dry socks, and then I bent down and I gave this man a big hug, and he just started sobbing. And I mean, it was just so, because it's not lost on me, being raised, in the United States, certainly a girl from Alabama, being raised in the Christian tradition and this and that, although I don't consider myself a Christian. uh it just, you can't deny how powerful that is, and especially where I used to be and what I used to believe about these quote unquote people.
Well,
And
if nothing,
it
if
was
not,
just the most it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful.
well, and the evangelical Christians in this country, many of whom are maggots and white nationalists and angry uh, members of rural America, residents of rural America who feel persecuted and disenfranchised. Um, they understand this story again from Sunday school and
Mhm.
their the lessons they get sitting in a pew every Sunday. And it's so powerful and emblematic of love and humility and acceptance that it was used in the Super Bowl commercial that they spent, over $10 million on. Did you see
I
that,
did
Jen?
No, I didn't watch the Super Bowl.
The gist
Yeah.
of their message was this: that you are supposed to be like Jesus, a humble servant tending to the immediate, even urgent needs of your fellow man without judgment, without asking questions about what's your status or why are you here or what happened.
Mhm.
Just expressing love and kindness in the way that you did.
It's amazing. It's just amazing, the experiences that I've been able to have outside of being an agent. And I mean, I say I've saved a lot of lives as an agent, but obviously I was enforcing laws that sent thousands of people to their deaths. And to be able to go out there, especially with limited function in my hands and stuff, and to be invited out there by people who do this out of the kindness of their heart, like every day, to be invited out there as a former agent and to participate in that was quite an honor for me. And I always love being able to go out there and do that. On my way back, I went through the Tohono O'odham Nation, and stopped over in Ajo, Arizona, which is western Arizona, and met with James Holman of Battalion and Abby, and they drove me around, and it was amazing. That's where we saw that wall with all the patches on it. That's where I ran into Border Patrol agents and talked to them and took pictures with them because they don't know who I am, and talked to them about the suicide rates and all this other stuff and everything. But they're still, it's interesting. The Border Patrol agents, they're just so geared in the mindset that I was. They all see themselves as the victims and everything in this. They're like, they're working us so hard, and this administration doesn't care and this and that. And I'm like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I just don't get into it with them, because it's just not, I mean, not that I haven't gotten into it with agents on the border. I have, but you know, these guys in the field, these men and women in the field that you see on the line, they're working anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. They're new. All they're ingesting at that young age when you're in the field like that is border patrol stuff. You're very isolated because you're working so much. And a lot of times, like in Ajo, you're living out in the middle of nowhere, or you're driving an hour and a half to work, or something like that because you live in Phoenix or Yuma or wherever. And so their whole life is border patrol, probably drinking and sex. That's pretty much what you're doing in your 20s anyhow, right? So, I mean, other than the border patrol. And so they're not paying attention. They have no idea who I am. So if I get out and I throw out a few law enforcement terms and stuff, and then border patrol terms and tell them I'm from Campo and stuff, they're like, oh, and then they're happy to talk about the border patrol and stuff. So that was interesting. They had some surveillance cameras that they put on these giant light poles in the at the Lukeville port of entry, and they're just all along the fence there around the port of entry. But every time they put them up, Mexicans climb the fence, and and then I don't know how they get up this pole, not the fence pole. I understand how they do that, but the single pole, they somehow get up on this single pole, and they rip out the camera, and they take the camera, and then they yank out all the copper wiring. So every time Border Patrol puts up these cameras that cost God only knows how much, they just yank them out, go sell them in Mexico, make some money, have dinner, whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but it's also awesome. And it's, you know,
Yeah.
they say that MAGA stands for Mexicans always get across.
They do. I mean,
And
there's nobody. I mean, Border Patrol agents will tell you this. Like, if there's a will, there's a way, man. They
yeah,
will do it. So they're very, ingenious about it, quite frankly.
they
The
really
stuff that
are.
they think about.
I think there's something else because we try to keep this timely and relevant. I think it's really important that we talk about something else. You mentioned the pressure that the Biden administration is under to reduce numbers, even though they're down just in January by about 50%. But we
Hmm.
also, have the election season coming upon us. We have the Border Patrol Union, which endorsed the immigration plan that the Democrats proposed, Biden's immigration plan, and now they're facing huge backlash for this. We had Brandon Judd standing next to Trump saying things that were false and, spitting fire and piss and venom. Uh,
Well, that was a really quick turnaround because, yeah, he came out for the Biden plan, and then he turned around and was like, but just like you said, they were getting backlash from their fans. If you followed on Twitter and stuff, they were like, "Oh, so now you love Biden?" And they just gave him shit. So then they had to turn around and do this thing with Trump. But here's the thing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Trump does not. If you are not loyal 100% to Trump, he will remember. And so Brandon Judd just fucked himself. That's how
yeah.
I see it. Go ahead,
Well,
Marilyn.
he's trying to make it right. And, we've got other people trying to aid in, I think, creating another crisis,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to distract from falling numbers, from the union's endorsement of the Democrats' bill, and all of this. And that is, unfortunately, the tragic murder of a young woman in Georgia, nursing student, who was murdered on campus,
Mm-hmm.
Laiken Riley. And I think it's really important for us, for you and me as women, to say her name. because she died a victim of violence. But the problem is not immigrants, as the state of Georgia and others seek to make it right now. The real problem is men. Men killing women, femicide. And, I love men. I'm on my second husband. I've got 3 boys I love. I am all about men and how wonderful they can be. But the truth in the United States is that 1/3 of all females, it's actually a little bit higher than that. It's about 35% of all women in the United States who are victims of homicide every year are killed by an intimate partner, not a stranger, not a migrant. They are killed by a boyfriend, someone they went on one date with, a stalker, someone who's become obsessed with them, a coworker or somebody online, their own husband,
Mm.
an ex-husband, even a boss at work. I mean, this is true and real. What happened to Laiken Riley is so incredibly rare, and it is a total outlier. But nobody in this country is going to talk about the real problem, which is that if you're a woman in this country, you are more likely to be murdered by your husband, ex-husband, coworker, boyfriend, somebody you had a few dates with.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, the union has been putting out they've been really harping on this, and I understand why they're harping on this. Obviously, this is a tragedy, and the man that did this to Lakin needs to pay for this. There needs to be justice for this. But to then turn around and say everybody who's of the same group as this man then deserves to be punished is the problem. And, the union had put out a tweet saying, it's not that Lakin would still be, wouldn't have been murdered by somebody else. It's just the fact that this guy wouldn't have been able to commit the murder had Joe Biden allowed us to do our job. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's just a PR statement. Joe Biden would let us do our job. As you mentioned, they're not handcuffed to trees and stuff. They are doing their job. They're following the law. When people cross the border and claim asylum, your job is to inspect them. If they have no records and stuff, then you have no valid reason to hold them. Just like if I, as an American, come to the port of entry and I show you my passport and you run my passport and there's no warrants for me, and then I go out and I go kill somebody, you're not responsible for that. You checked me. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any warrants for my arrest as an American citizen. You can't do anything about it. And that just simply is the law. And so my reply to them was, I mean, not to say that this isn't a tragedy and this man shouldn't be dealt with, but that kind of reasoning gets the kind of response from me of, well, children wouldn't have been molested if you didn't hire that Border Patrol agent, Dana Thornhill, in Tucson, Arizona, and he let him work for you for 17 years and make him a chaplain in Tucson Sector if you had just not hired him because he did have a previous criminal record where he raped a little girl when he was 14 years old, and yet you still hired him. Dude, you guys commit more crimes than the migrants you arrest. It's a known fact.
It is a
So,
known fact. And on borderpatrolwatch.com, you're documenting this. How many sex offenders did you just add to the website?
I think it was 18.
Yeah, it was more than a dozen. And here again, they're
You know,
not going to blame her, which, I'm thankful for that. Nobody
yeah,
is saying, as they do with women and children and even
as the
men,
Border Patrol does with me about being raped in the academy.
as they have done with you, saying, well, if she hadn't been wearing that skirt, or if she hadn't batted her
Hmm.
eyelashes, if she hadn't been jogging alone, or,
Mm.
jogging in a sports bra, or, whatever. And I have no idea what she was wearing, but thankfully, no one appears to be blaming the victim. But that's only because the perpetrator is an immigrant and a man of
That,
color.
I mean, it would be the same as saying, and you know, I get mad at this when people say, even as bad as the Border Patrol rape culture is, I get mad when people say all Border Patrol agents are rapists because it's just not true. It's not true.
It's not true. And all men are not abusers or rapists or murderers.
You know, the thing about it too that gets me when we're talking about violence against women and stuff, it's obviously we see what happened in Israel and what's going on in Gaza, and it's on all sides. And when anybody comes out and points to one group and says, "Aha, they're the ones that are doing this," and how horrible this is, and this and that. I mean, come on. You know, the United States. I mean, the Border Patrol has such a huge cover up team. This country, I mean, the biggest thing we've ever done for women recently and violence towards women is the Me Too movement, which is just us confessing everything that's been done to us. And yet no policy changes have happened.
No, Georgia,
Nothing.
their House managed to pass a law allowing police to arrest and submit for deportation any person in the state they suspect may be here illegally. But from, I believe it's 2017 to 2021, those 5 years, just in Georgia, there were approximately 2,000 women murdered by their intimate partners. And the
Yeah.
data's a little unclear because in order to reduce those numbers beyond the underreporting, they have women who were murdered, and then they have the murder suicides as a separate category. So,
She wasn't just a pain in the ass. She was such a pain in the ass. He had to kill himself too.
he had, he had to kill himself. And next, they'll have a separate category for family annihilators who not only
Ugh.
murder the woman, but also the children. And then they'll have, so they'll just keep subdividing these to make the numbers look smaller and smaller. But there has been absolutely no law passed in Georgia. Police can go and arrest a man for suspicion of being an abuser, a rapist, or somebody with murder on his mind. Yeah, so it's never really about protecting women, just like it's not about protecting the unborn.
I told the Border Patrol Union the last few days, maybe yesterday it was, because they were going on about this, and I understand that. But like I said, you know, they're stereotyping a whole group of people. And I said, well, you know, if you want to get down to it, you've had 3 chiefs removed in a year, 2 of which we know, like we said on last episode, for forcing female agents to have sex with them and being a belligerent about it and stuff. And yet they're allowed to retire with their, you know, image intact and their pension intact. And we're not going to talk about that. I mean, and I said, you really want to get at it? How about how you help the agents who are accused of doing this to female agents and you provide them support? But we as female agents, we don't get any support. We don't get any union help. All you do is sabotage us and tell everybody that we're filing a suit. So then everybody harasses us. You do not represent female agents. That's why there's only 5% of us. That's why they call us the fierce 5%. And it's like, I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know why some attorney hasn't walked up to me and said, you know, you've proven this is systemic since 1975. They've been raping y'all. We need to do something about it in the Border Patrol. Let's do a class action lawsuit. But everyone's like, oh no, there's nothing you can do. Although
They're
CBP right now is doing a class action lawsuit, but it's not for the same thing. It's something else, I think.
they're never going to do that because the problem is men. And men around the world have created all of the systems,
Yep.
the police, the laws, the courts that not only protect them from assault, battery, rape, murder, but actually serve to punish the women who survive or who speak out. So they have,
Mm-hmm.
it really is a double fisted 1-2 punch.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like an example of that, and the Border Patrol, I probably talked about it before, but just in case you didn't hear it, is when this happens to you, they tell you you need to file EEO because you're in a paramilitary kind of agency and they want you to go through your command. And so you try and do that, but all of your EEO advisors that you talk to are your male superiors. who are protecting the same system that they have protected the whole freaking time that they've enjoyed. And so then when you do file what's an equal employment opportunity thing for what should probably be either a crime, or if it's harassment, then it should be through EEO. But
Well, it's a
at the same
statutory violation,
yeah,
yes.
but even if it's a rape like mine, I was told you can only file EEO. And so what happens is EEO essentially has become what Donald Trump did with that porn star. It pays female agents to keep their mouth shut, and then they get promoted to keep their mouth shut.
Well, and
And that's how they
you
solve this. They buy their way out of everything, and that's all EEO is. It's a freaking joke.
well, and you
It's just a clearinghouse for the federal government's sexual assaults that happen to employees. That's what it
to
is.
cover it up, just like the CITs do for the Border Patrol
Yeah.
agents and
Yep.
academy directors and training officers and supervisors. And you absolutely could have gone to the local police. I know that you didn't know that then, but you could have gone
Well,
to the local police, but they wouldn't have done a damn thing about it.
I would have lost my job.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
flat out told me you lose your job if you
Yeah.
go and do this.
But
So,
and so that's how they keep you between the navigational
mhm,
buoys and keep their
mhm.
thumb on your neck.
I mean, it's great that the women are starting to come out and complain against these high-ranking agents that are doing this. That's the first step. But the next step is you have to deal with CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility. You have to get the fact that, the head of that is Dan Altman, who's a former Border Patrol agent, and many of his investigators are Border Patrol agents. You have to clean that up. This is the way Border Patrol has controlled investigations into them, whether it's for a shooting case, whether it's for raping a female agent, whether it's for molesting a child that's in their custody. This is how they get away with all these crimes. You literally have to be over the top with your evidence, and then obviously a very strong and fierce advocate when this happens to you to be able to get anything done, to be able to hold anybody accountable. It is, and then you see what happens. Ultimately, they leak the information to the high ranking man who's under investigation so that he can then retire and keep everything he wants. And then the investigations just stop. I mean, I just talked to somebody from the New York Times who knows about the Tony Barker case that happened last year. And I just talked to her yesterday and said, "So whatever happened with that?" She goes, "Well, I assume they finished the investigation." I assume? I assume?
Then you
Aren't you the
assume
reporter from the New York Times?
incorrectly.
Aren't you supposed to find out? And then she goes, "So he just retired and I guess everything's fine." I'm like, oh, okay. I guess the women are all good and everything. We're just not going to follow up on any of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, that's what I finally like in watching the union talk about Miss Riley's murder and seeing how they're trying to use that to paint every migrant with this criminal brush that they have, this large criminal brush. It's just like, do you really want to play that game? Because I can throw out a whole bunch of agents that you guys cover for. You're
And
serial rapists, you're serial murderers. I mean, come on,
and
geez,
those are
guys.
just the ones,
We know
they should
about.
all count their lucky stars that on Border Patrol Watch, you are only posting the ones who have been charged
Yeah,
and
because there is that thing called professional courtesy that exist in law enforcement. Where if I'm a sheriff and you're a border patrol agent and I happen to catch you doing something you shouldn't be doing, I might just not book you and we might try and resolve it outside of actually physically making an arrest and stuff. So,
well, you might not get arrested, you might not get charged.
you
Not
might.
only might you not be convicted, you may never be arrested or charged or indicted for the crimes that you commit as a law enforcement officer, specifically as a Border Patrol agent. For example, in the Rio Grande Valley sector, we had supervisory U.S. Border Patrol agent Roy Ramirez Jr. in 2020, who was indicted by a grand jury for sexual assault.
Yeah, I think it would be a sexual assault. I think it said in the indictment forced oral copulation of a female agent.
So this wasn't even a crime against some random person. It was
Hmm.
a colleague, a coworker, perhaps an underling, a female U.S. Border Patrol agent that, if I understood you correctly, um, he forced her to give him a blowjob in the parking lot?
Yeah, that's the game of smiles. That's very common in the Border Patrol. So he was arrested in 2020 for allegedly forcing a female subordinate to perform oral sex. He was indicted by a grand jury in Hidalgo County, that's the Rio Grande Valley sector, in July of 2021. Then in January of 2023, the charges were finally dismissed. So 2 years, well, a year and a half after the indictment, the charges are dismissed because the court document stated, quote, no victim available.
What the
What do you
hell
mean
does
no
that
victim
mean?
available? She's not just, she's not maybe a migrant that you deported. She's a freaking employee of the
She
same
was a
station that he
federal
works at.
agent. She was a federal
Well,
law enforcement
that's my
agent,
understanding. Yeah.
and
And
she's
so they just say she's
vanished?
disappeared. We don't know where she is.
Hmm.
And I've asked out in the open because some of the chiefs sometimes will talk to me privately, but the chiefs right now won't. And Gloria Chavez obviously won't. She's the chief of Rio Grande Valley sector right now. And I had asked her, hey, what's the deal with this guy? Is this guy still a border patrol agent? Where's the woman that was sexually assaulted? Aren't you concerned that you're missing a border patrol agent? Apparently, they can't be found, and this and that. So I would imagine that, and this is just an assumption on my part. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that they found out that she complained, and then they harassed the shit out of her. Is what they did.
She could be anywhere, but I
She
don't
could have
believe
quit.
for I don't believe for 1 second that the feds cannot find her.
That's what I mean, especially going through that. God only knows what her trauma might be. She might have had to leave the patrol. I mean, I a couple of years ago was talking to you, and I still have all the texts and stuff. Female agent out of the same sector, and she was being harassed, and she said, "I want to go through my command," and I said, "Okay." But they're going to just like, one on one, they might encourage you to file a complaint, but together they're going to sit there and look at you like, mm-hmm. It's a he said, she said, and this. And she goes, well, my watch commander is a female. And I said, well, good luck with that. Because let me tell you, the females only get promoted if they cover up the rape culture in the Border Patrol. That's the only way you get promoted in the Border Patrol. It's why a lot of the females who are chiefs are lesbians. Just going to say that.
Well, and we discussed this in the last edition, didn't
Mm-hmm.
we?
Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
the female agents who have risen in rank have been some of the worst, the most cruel, the ones who have implemented the most egregious policies that harm human beings. They have covered things up. And as a result, they have been rewarded. As you say, they have risen through the
Mm-hmm.
ranks to even becoming the chief of the entire agency.
And a lot of them have that reputation, even though they may be married to their partner and stuff. Of doing the same thing that the men do. I'll just say leave it as that. There's plenty of complaints that go against female agents as well. So they embody that rape culture. They become part of it, and that's why they would be trusted and then promoted. Obviously, we're going to keep coming back to this topic because the Border Patrol won't address any of this stuff. But obviously, our sympathy goes out to the Laiken Riley family, and we definitely want to see justice in this. But please do not turn around and then point your finger at everybody that you think is a migrant and claim that, oh, this person's going to rape me now, and this and that, or kill me or whatever. I mean, this is just, it would be the same thing if we turned around and pointed to all men and said, we need to lock all these men up because they're the one that does 95, 98% of the raping or killing or whatever it is. So it's just, it's stereotyping and it's prejudice is what it is. So.
It is, and it's being done exclusively to serve a hateful, anti-immigrant, racist agenda in this country. And as you said, what happened to Laiken Riley was horrible. We hate that it happened. She did not do a damn thing to deserve it. But it's going to continue to happen until women do the same thing that men have done since the dawn of time. And that is violence against one of us is violence against all of us.
Mm.
And we stand together.